Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I want to thank our sponsors and partners for this event, the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition, Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, Wisconsin Board of People with Developmental Disabilities, Disability Rights Wisconsin, Access to Independence, the League of Women Voters, and the City of Madison Department of Civil Rights. Voting is an essential part of our power as a disability community, and I'm so excited to share with you all some amazing work that the City of Madison and our partners are doing to advance the disability vote. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mayor Satya Rhodes-Conway from the City of Madison. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody who made this event possible. I also want to recognize that our Council President, Keith Furman, is here with us, and we have a number of city staff, so thank you all for being here to help us celebrate disability voting rights. So I see Alder Vitever is here as well. Thank you, Alder, for joining us. I think you can see the commitment that the City of Madison has to this issue. And I am really proud to be here celebrating and, most importantly, calling attention to both National Voter Registration Month, which is the month of September, and Disability Voting Rights Week, which is this week. Disability Voting Rights Week is a nonpartisan, community-led initiative that is dedicated to the visibility, empowerment, and education and engagement of disabled voters. In the United States, there are over 38 million people with disabilities who are eligible to vote. That's over 15% of our electorate. If voters with disabilities voted at the same rate as people without disabilities, they would represent a voting bloc of 1.75 million voters. However, historically, there have been significant gaps in voter turnout for people with disabilities. And all too often, this is due to lack of access. Elections directly affect the everyday lives of people with disabilities, and it is absolutely essential that the disability community be afforded equity in exercising their right to participate in our democracy. The City of Madison is committed to making the November elections accessible to all of our residents, and particularly to residents with disabilities. In a minute, you'll hear from city staff with more details about how we do this. But before that, I want to acknowledge that our democracy has been under attack in Wisconsin, and that all too often, that has taken the form of trying to limit or discourage access to the ballot for marginalized or vulnerable voters. I am so grateful for the advocacy of our local community members and organizations in the recent Kerry versus Weck decision. The implementation of this decision is one example of how we intend to ensure that the voices of disabled people are heard and that their votes are cast and counted. This decision upholds the rights of voters with disabilities to choose a person, other than their employer or union representative, to deliver their ballot to their polling place. The choice of who returns your ballot is an important decision and should remain with voters with disabilities. Additionally, the decision ensures that voters with disabilities will not encounter additional barriers of having to prove or demonstrate their disability at the polling site. We all live lives of interdependence. We all rely on others to accomplish daily tasks. Voting should not be an exception. I urge everyone in the City of Madison, but today especially, I urge our disability community to register to vote and to vote in the manner most accessible to you. We also hope to see more members of our disability community involved in elections as poll workers and poll monitors. When voters with and without disabilities see you at their polling place, it gives visibility to the importance of your role in elections. Today, I say to our community, and particularly to those who experience disabilities, that your voice and your vote matter. And now it's my pleasure to invite one of our clerks, Jim Verbick, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome everyone. Good morning. I just want to start this the first way we start every poll worker training we do, and that's to repeat our goal, which is not a very radical goal, but that we believe that each eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot and have that ballot counted. I want to go over some of the accommodations that we make for our voters. I first want to start with absentee voting. So if you happen to be indefinitely confined due to age, physical illness, or disability for an indefinite period, a voter may request an absentee ballot that will be sent permanently to them for all future elections until that voter chooses to end that request or they fail to return a ballot for an election. Being indefinitely confined does not require a permanent or total inability to travel outside of one's home. Unlike other absentee requests, a permanent absentee request does not require the proof of a voter ID in order to get the ballot. If you wish to receive a mailed absentee ballot in Braille, that is something that we are absolutely able to accommodate. The City of Madison is fully capable of this request. In fact, our city has worked with the Wisconsin Election Commission to use our procedures as a model for other municipalities across the state to help provide other voters with a visual disability to receive their ballot in a way in which they can read it themselves. Another matter we use is our special voting deputies. So any qualified care facility in which there are at least 5 registered voters or an absentee voting request, we send what's called special voting deputies, and these are election officials that we deputize and train to make 2 visits to a qualifying facility in which they'll present the ballot to the voters and give them an opportunity to vote the ballot there with our election officials. If they do not choose to or do not want to vote with those special voting deputies, then we'll mail a ballot afterwards. And now let's go to Election Day. So on Election Day, all our polling places are accessible to voters with disabilities. Every election morning, we have our poll workers use a checklist in which we prepared with the guidance from Disability Rights Wisconsin to identify and address any barriers voters may face at the polls. If you are unable to access into the polling place due to any health issues, mobility issues, disability, or just difficulty waiting in the line to vote, you may vote at curbside outside your polling place. Each polling place will have a sign outside of the polling place with a phone number in which you can reach somebody directly inside the polling place. Or you can also send somebody inside. You can call us ahead of time to schedule something to let us know you're coming, in which we'll have 2 poll workers check that voter in at the ballot, at the poll book rather, and then they will announce the polling place that they're taking a ballot outside to a voter, so as not to make anyone concerned about the ballot leaving the polling place. And then these 2 poll workers will bring the ballot out to the voter. The voter can vote their ballot. We'll provide a pen and a privacy sleeve, so once the voter has finished voting their ballot, they can put it in a cardboard privacy sleeve so as to not ruin the secrecy of one's ballot as they should have. And then the poll workers will then bring that ballot into the polling place to feed that ballot in to our tabulator to have it counted the same way any other ballot would. Curbside voters are exempt from signing the poll book. We do not want to bring the poll book out depending on what the weather is. And that's the accommodations we have for curbside voting. If a voter is unable to sign or speak, we do have accommodations for that. So in Wisconsin, we are not a signature match state. So you do not need to have a signature that matches anything in order for your vote to be counted. A voter is able to make any mark they wish on the signature line in either the poll book or on their absentee ballot. If a voter is unable to make a signature at all, a voter does absolutely not have to do that. They are able to be given an exemption from signing the poll book. If a voter is unable to state their name and address, they're able to designate somebody, including a poll worker, to do that for them. If you need help marking your ballot, there are 3 different ways in which you can do this. You can bring someone to the polling place with you to help you with that. The only people you can't have come with you are your employer or your union representative. And the poll worker will record their name and address in order to document that. The second is you may use an express vote machine, which is a ballot marking device, and we have 2 of those in the lobby, which I'll be happy to show anyone who is interested in learning more about that. The express vote machine is helpful because it assists a voter in making the marks on a ballot that can be counted. It has a touchpad. It also has a braille keypad which can be used. It offers large print, high contrast. There are headphones to read the screen for a voter. And it is also compatible with sip and puff devices. The express vote will let you review your selections before printing, so you can make any corrections that you need to. The express vote ballots are fed through the tabulator the same way any other hand-marked ballot is. If you have ever voted before at any of our in-person absentee voting sites, these are what we use at those locations. By law, every polling place in the state of Wisconsin is required to have at least 1 accessible voting machine. And any voter of any ability may request to use an express vote machine at their polling place. And lastly, you may ask a poll worker to assist you in marking your ballot if you need to. So thank you, and if you have any questions of the express vote machine, I'm happy to help show you about it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Denise Jess, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. I'm proud to be a member of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition and also a member of the Wisconsin Elections Commission Accessibility Advisory Committee. So yeah, voting occupies a lot of my time and energy and passion. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. This morning, I am so touched by the folks who are here on this gorgeous day, both the advocates and our allies who are here, and thank you so much to the media that's here to cover and help tell the important story of creating greater access for those of us with disabilities to the ballot to have our right to vote. I also want to commend the mayor and the clerk's office and all of our city officials who put great effort into making sure voting is accessible for not only people with disabilities, all disenfranchised or marginalized folks who need to have access to the ballot. And thank you to the clerk's office for not only being leaders in this area in the city of Madison, but you are awesome leaders to your fellow clerks across the state. Despite all of the excellent advocacy that happens here, we know that the barriers that face those of us with disabilities to be able to cast our ballot and to have it counted are pervasive and persistent. The clerk's office spoke about the importance of the assister in the voting process. So whether we're voting absentee or in the polling place, we do have the right to that assister to not only read the ballot, to mark it under the direction of the voter for those of us who cannot access it, and to be able to deliver that ballot to the clerk as needed. We know that for voters in the state of Wisconsin who choose to use an assister, that they have had their assister's legitimacy questioned by voting officials, by poll workers, and by clerks. And the voter, again, I want to reiterate, has the right to choose their own assister, and it's so important that that be honored because the intimacy that is happening between a voter and trusting someone to mark their ballot according to their wishes or safely deliver it is incredible. So that person needs to be trusted by the voter. So other than the employer, the union steward, or someone on the ballot, the voter has the right to ask for that assistance. Too often, we've also heard from voters around the state that when they've asked a poll worker for assistance, the poll worker has denied them that assistance, believing that they were not able to assist. The poll worker can assist with the ballot completion. When the voter gets to the polling place, they do have the right to have that assistance in the polling place as well. They have the right to use the accessible voting equipment or the universal voting equipment, and they also have the right to curbside voting. Too often, we also hear stories where the accessible voting equipment, despite the requirement in Wisconsin law that it be set up and ready to go, that equipment is not sometimes plugged in when the voter gets there. Sometimes it's segregated to a corner away from the other polling stations, and really removed from the active part of the voting. Sometimes it's not programmed yet. Sometimes the print cartridge hasn't been changed in a long time, and poll workers are taking the print cartridge out and banging it. It's older pieces of equipment. And many of our municipalities around the state continue to use equipment that we would consider antiquated and not voter-friendly. We need to make sure that this equipment is set up, ready to go. And we want to encourage any and all voters to feel free to use that equipment. It is there for all of us. It's not just, air quotes, those people, end of air quotes, who use that machine, meaning those of us with disabilities. When you use that accessible voting equipment as a voter, you help liberate all of us by making the equipment known and helping poll workers see the value of that equipment. Not only do voters have the right to curbside, they often don't know how to access it. And often the poll workers may not know that there is a voter outside who needs to have curbside. Sometimes there's a honk if you need to vote curbside, but the conditions aren't good for the poll workers to hear the honk, or there's a phone number to call. So we want to see increased access to curbside voting with really clear instructions to both poll workers and the voters about how to use that curbside voting. And this is where we desperately need poll workers. At the August election, I was stunned and dismayed at the few number of poll workers at my usually vibrant polling place on the Isthmus. And I know we have a worker shortage when it comes to poll workers. Please consider being a poll worker. Just as the mayor said, we need that diversity at the polls, and we also need you to help because there's so many vital roles, like greeting voters, helping orient us in the polling place, walking out to the curbside voters so that our polling places can be vibrant and alive and really serve the needs of all voters. When we're voting absentee in the state of Wisconsin, other than the Braille ballot, which is not available much beyond the city of Madison and the city of Milwaukee. I appreciate the clerk's office working here with the Elections Commission, as is the Milwaukee Elections Board, to help get that Braille ballot out statewide. It's not happening yet. And the small number of folks who use Braille really leaves many people without an accessible absentee option. Wisconsin law prohibits the distribution of an electronic ballot, one that could be emailed, that those of us who use screen reading technology could hear, and that we could use our keyboards and other devices to physically mark and to return to the clerk. We need to see that change in Wisconsin state law, and so our ask is that we all collectively work to educate our legislature, especially our new the legislators as they come in the fall, to the need for an accessible absentee ballot, which would actually increase the availability for many folks who would want to be able to vote using that method. So in closing today, I want to invite all of us to use that accessible equipment to help shine the light on it, to educate ourselves about the barriers that are faced by people with disabilities, including across disability. My barriers may be different than your barriers. I want to know about your barriers, and I want you to know about mine. To educate our policymakers, not only about the changes that need to exist in Wisconsin law, but the practices that are already in law that need to be followed on a consistent basis in every polling place in Wisconsin. And then to lift up the voters in your life who may have disabilities, help make a voting plan with them, support with transportation, really help make sure that everyone gets to the polls or votes absentee that wants to do so. In that work of being a really effective ally, you support our collective liberation and support a healthy, robust democracy. And lastly, what I'll want to invite is my peers with disabilities, please make your plan to vote. And vote not only on November 8th, but every election, because we have both the right and the responsibility to make the critical decisions about who is representing us and making key decisions about the quality of our lives. In the words of the disability rights advocate Justin Dart, vote as if your life depended upon it, because in fact it does. So I'm so excited to welcome Nicki Vander Meulen to the podium to introduce herself and to share her words.
Thank you, Denise. My name's Nicki Vander Meulen. The hard part about going fifth is everyone's taken the best points already that you've already written down. So I figure I'll go with my story instead. Accessible voting is the most important priority to me. As a Madison School Board member, as a committee member in Wisconsin and the City Council and Disability Commission here. Why is it so important? Because it's the only voice I have and the way that I can best explain to the public why my vote matters and why my vote counts. I was born 12 years before the ADA passed. I was kicked out of preschool at 3 because I couldn't walk right. My parents had to file formal grievance to get me into elementary school. Now I'm on a school board. Why? Because people made an elected decision on their leaders to select leaders who passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was a great start, but we got to go further. We have to unite every individual with disabilities around the cause of accessible voting. This is our voice, this is our moment, this is our time. Our individuals with disabilities will be the largest voting bloc if we unify. That means health care without caps. That means not having to worry about suggested incomes or worry that benefits will be cut if you get married, if you get jobs, if you can get the accommodations you need, or even affordable housing. Without the vote, none of that's possible. Without the vote, I don't exist. Plain and simple. It wasn't until 1991 when 81 individuals climbed up the stairs of the U.S. Capitol and the Capitol crawl to state that they had a right of existence. I want to take that right further. I want to be able to make sure that every individual with disabilities continues the proud tradition and will vote and vote accessibly. This occurred most recently in the Casey decision, Casey versus WIC. I am thrilled by the Casey decision, in which it stated that individuals with disabilities have the right to have assistance with their ballot. That's what the Voting Rights Act said, the Federal Voting Rights Act said, and why should Wisconsin be different? Why should our votes be silenced? They should not. The way we get change in this state is to focus and join together. We unite, we educate, and we agitate. We do that by going door to door. We make sure our polling places are accessible. We volunteer to vote. We volunteer to work at every single polling place. We don't miss an election. And we make sure that we're at every meeting. We make sure that all the polling places don't have a barrier in front of them, or that people can't hear when someone needs to vote. Because this right is our fight for existence. And I thank you all for your time.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Norm Davis. I'm the Civil Rights Director for the City of Madison. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I just really want to express my gratitude for everyone that's here today. Thank you to Mayor Satya Rhodes-Conway. Thank you to all of the elected officials that are here, the city staff, our community partners, and the media. Voting is the most fundamental right in our democracy. And our democracy has been driven in many ways by the voices of people with disabilities. The Wisconsin Disability Voting Rights Coalition is an example of people on the ground working to ensure full participation in the entire electoral process of voters with disabilities, including registering to vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling places. As President Lyndon B. Johnson said, the right to vote is the basic right without which all others are meaningless. It gives people as individuals, control over their own destinies. President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Civil Rights Act of 1968. The Americans with Disabilities Act was later modeled after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And Title II of the ADA guarantees people with disabilities have a full and equal opportunity to vote in state and local elections. The right for you to control your own destiny has been a basic tenet of the disability rights movement for decades. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 5 adults in Wisconsin has a disability. Additionally, we know that disability is more prevalent in communities of Black, Indigenous people of color. Legislation that has the effect of suppressing the votes of people of color and low-income communities also have the effect of suppressing votes of people with disabilities. Inversely, policies and practices that have the effect of suppressing the votes of people with disabilities also have the effect of suppressing votes of low-income and Black and Indigenous people of color. Voting is an intersectional civil rights issue that requires solidarity across movements and meaningful allyship. The City of Madison recognizes that we have a role to play in building relationships. We're working within our community to ensure that voters have trust in the electoral process, that eligible voters in the City of Madison have the full opportunity and access to vote, and that as public servants, we are accountable to all of our residents, including our residents with disabilities. Additionally, our leaders must ensure that diverse community members be at the table whenever issues of voting access are discussed, and in all places where decisions about their rights and opportunities are being made. So we make this call to action today. Please register to vote. Make a plan to vote. Prepare for Election Day and vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want to thank again all of our wonderful speakers today. And our partners with the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. And now I want to invite all of you to join us in the lobby to experience the accessible voting machines firsthand, to exchange resources, and to grab a bite to eat. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Rebecca, can we do a picture of you?
Oh, and I'm sorry, we'd love to invite all of the community members and allies to come behind the podium so that we can take a photo together. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Nice try.
Shall we just gather right here?
Let's do that.
Who's the photographer, though?
Julie's got a camera.
Linda.
Regina.
There you go.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, Julie has a camera with the green right there.
Photography service.
The black.
You're on it.